Greetings. Welcome to Thought for the Day. My name is Jeremy. Let us consider climate change. 800 years ago there was a great teacher of good care for God's wonderful world. His name, St. Francis of Assisi. Right now, he would be appalled and sorrowful to note that we are in such deep trouble with our care of this planet. So what's gone wrong? The world is getting hotter. Burning fossil fuels is causing it. But how? 30 years ago, there was a television series and a book called Save the Earth. Prince Charles wrote the foreword and David Attenborough wrote the introduction. They explained these approaching world problems. 5 years later, the Vice President of the USA wrote a book called An Inconvenient Truth. It too explained and warned of the pending climate disaster. People talked about it and countries met and discussed it. Then, 22 years later, in 2018, a 15-year-old Swedish girl called Greta Thunberg reminded the world that the time for just talking was past. Action had to be now. Time had run out. So how was it caused? Let me give you an example. When I was a boy, we had a blanket on the bed, 1 in summer, 2 in the spring and the autumn, and 3 in winter, and each kept us right in that season. But if I'd had 3 blankets on in summer, I'd have roasted. Well, the world is in danger of roasting. Although you can't see it, the world has an atmospheric blanket wrapped around it. As God made it, this blanket was just the right thickness, so the world temperature has stayed fine for thousands of years. The planet Venus also has a blanket around it. That one is thick, so Venus is too hot for life as we know it. The planet Mars also has a blanket around it, but that one is thin, so the temperature there is too cold for life as we know it. That's why Earth is known as the Goldilocks planet. Not too hot, not too cold, but just right. Our splendid blanket of the upper atmosphere lets the sun's rays warm the Earth and then bounce back off into space. And that has worked well until now. So what's gone wrong? God created a splendid balance in the air between plants and animals. Plants breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. Animals do exactly the opposite. They breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. So these two crucial gases are well balanced in the air. But millions of years ago, plant remains were laid down in layers within the earth. Then, nearly 300 years ago, humans started boring and mining for these fossil fuels, such as coal, oil and gas. They burned them to provide heat and energy. Later, they powered the Industrial Revolution, and the world then continued ever expanding the burning of fossil fuels. We now distribute gas and electricity to run homes and industry, but most of this still comes from burning fossil fuels. Burning uses oxygen and gives off carbon dioxide into the air. So there is the culprit. That extra carbon dioxide, or CO2 as it's called from its formula, caused by burning fossil fuels, thickens the atmosphere. CO2 has a number of like-minded mates. Collectively they're known as the greenhouse gases. They create the thicker blanket that is now causing global warming. But we have been warned. About 125 years ago, a Swedish scientist, Svante Arrhenius, warned that this extra carbon dioxide from the combustion of fossil fuels would adversely alter or affect the atmosphere. He was right, but the world did not listen. So what is the answer? It calls for swift and drastic action. Every country in the world needs to stop burning fossil fuels as soon as possible. Power for transport, lighting, heating and industry worldwide must now come from other sources, such as wind, waves, tides, sunlight and nuclear power. The big advantage of these is that they will all be made in Britain, so we will control our fuel prices. We plan to eliminate the use of coal in the next few years. We also plan to stop licensing new petrol and diesel engine cars by 2030. But should we have acted sooner and faster and bolder? The fossil fuel companies have vested interests and they have powerful lobbies. Our development of electric cars is gathering strength. Wind farms are going up apace, particularly at sea. They may change the view, but they may also save the planet. We have nuclear reactors. We encourage solar parks and solar panels on our houses. Electrical storage is making good progress, and soon we should see electrical storage in our houses. Oil and gas central heating will start to be phased out increasingly over the next decade. Air compression heat pumps are now vastly improved and are used at Hyde Church Centre and Hyde Village Hall. Britain is doing well, but still needs to progress faster. However, there are many countries around the world that are lagging far behind. So the advanced nations must do more in order to compensate for countries with schedules that are too slow. Each year, the world burns massive quantities of fossil fuels and thus thickens the blanket around the world year after year. So our planet's overheating is getting worse. So we must first diminish the increase. By the time we get the rate of increase to zero, the world will be in deep trouble. Then we must continue the descent until we get back to God's planned atmosphere as it used to be. Meanwhile, the impending consequences include melting polar ice that will raise sea levels and permanently flood coastal lowlands. Grasslands will become arid and the livestock starve, causing widespread human starvation. Also, as the world warms, the great tidal flows, such as the Gulf Stream, may change course, causing marked climate changes. Already, tornadoes are stronger and more frequent. Forest fires destroy as never before. Floods are more frequent, with disastrous consequences in India and other countries. We're fast approaching a possible tipping point, where the damage might gather speed with a momentum beyond control. Some experts calculate that this could be as soon as 2030. Politicians hope that by reducing the rate of global warming increase, they can avoid catastrophe. Scientists mostly think that such plans are too optimistic and too slow. So now we come to the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. It is called COP, COP26. The 26 is because there have already been 25 such conferences before it. COP stands for Conference of Parties. You may wonder why it is not Conference of Countries. Their aim is that by 2050 the world will not produce any excess carbon. Net zero, they call it. In the meantime, the world's temperature rise must be kept below 2% increase per annum. 1.5% is the preferred target, but that will not be achieved by some countries. So, if it takes 10 more years of increasing heat before we start to get the descent, then there will inevitably be major problems. At present, we are all at sea in a boat with a hole in the bottom, so it is essential that those who can must plug the hole, or else we all sink. Spending large sums of money on this problem may not be popular, as it offers no tangible, instant improvement, even though it saves the world. This is a big public relations exercise that's needed to show why this is the world's top priority. This crisis, on top of COVID, makes for a very difficult few years ahead. Parliament will have to be united and determined. The solution also calls for much individual change over the next few years in personal transport, home heating, cooking, lighting and so on. Most people dislike change. It's stressful and often expensive. By mid-November, the talking will be over and the agreement signed. Will they have promised enough? Will the majority of the world's countries achieve their intentions over the next decade? Will the people back the necessary action? When will we know whether global warming has been turned back and is decreasing? Younger generations are watching anxiously. Older generations are watching fearfully. Can wisdom prevail? If not, what then? Thank you for sharing these thoughts. May God be with you. Goodbye.